from their faith. So if you're in chapter 10, we're going to start with verse 19, chapter 10 and verse 19. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new way, which he hath consecrated for us through the veil, that is to say, his flesh. And having a high priest over the house of God, let us draw near with a true heart in full assurance of faith, having our hearts sprinkled with an evil conscience and our bodies washed with pure water. Let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. And let us consider one another to provoke unto love and to good works, not forsaking the assembling of ourselves together, as the manner of some is, but exhorting one another, and so much more as we see the day approaching. For if we sin willingly, after that we have received the knowledge of the truth, there remaineth no more sacrifice for sins, but a certain fearful looking of judgment and fiery indignation, which shall devour the adversaries. He that despised Moses' law died without mercy under 2 or 3 witnesses. Of how much sore punishment suppose ye shall be thought worthy, who have trodden under foot the Son of God, and have counted the blood of the covenant, wherewith he was sanctified, an unholy thing, and have done despite unto the Spirit of grace. So we see these Hebrews that are being lured back into their old religion, if you will. And just so we're very clear, if you've ever sat in any of my Sunday school teachings, and maybe here on a Wednesday night I've mentioned, the easiest way for me to describe this is we are an extension of the Jewish religion. We are the conclusion of the Jewish religion. Throughout the Old Testament, we see the promises that was given to the Jewish people. The Messiah came from the Jewish people, and the Messiah came to the Jewish people and did great miracles, and they rejected him. And he turned to the Gentiles. Christ died on the cross, rose again, and they didn't believe in the Messiah. Still today, even though all of these promises, even though all of these prophecies, even though all of these things that we say, even though one rose from the dead and was seen by 500, they still reject Christ as their Messiah. So now it's given to the Gentiles. We profited off of that. Well, that was prophesied from the beginning also, that the Gentiles would profit from this Son of God, this perfect sacrifice that was given on Calvary. A little out of breath this evening, so please bear with me. So the Jews that believed on Christ, the Jews that seen that their religion, everything led up to a Messiah, they were waiting on a Messiah, and finally the Messiah came, and that was Jesus Christ, and they believed in him. And so did Gentiles. So did so many. But these Jewish people, once they started being persecuted by other Jewish people, once they started being persecuted by their peers, the people around them, once they started feeling hurt and loss, then they started to turn back. Went back to the synagogue, went back to the temple, went back to the way they had done things before. So the writer of Hebrews, and we're not really sure exactly who it is. I tried to find out. I studied, and I found it could have been Paul. It's Pauline-type writings, and the flavor, if you will, when you read it, it sure sounds like Paul. If I was asked, I would think it was Paul that wrote Hebrews. Some say it might have been Luke, because Luke it was very articulate. But he didn't have, being a Gentile, he didn't have a deep understanding of the temple and what had went on. And that's what we just read here, starting with verse 19. A deep looking at what these Hebrew people are coming from, what they're used to, the type of worship they're used to. Might have been Barnabas. Barnabas, I think they said he came from a Levite background. He might have had an intricate knowledge of how the temple functions worked. Could have been Silas, could have been Apollos. But the writer, whoever it was, started out there in verse 19 saying, having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest. So he's reminding them about their worship in the temple. He's showing us that you can go to the holiest of holiest straight to God by the blood of Jesus Christ. He's comparing the old, what they're talking about and thinking about, going back to the new, what they had clung to in the beginning, that they had believed in. It was Jesus, and he's showing them the difference between the two, if you will. And then in verse 20, he's reminding them of the consecrated for us. That was a way of setting something aside for holy use. He's reminding them. And then he mentions the veil there in verse 20. Once again, reminding them of the worship that they had come from the temple. And then in verse 21, he compares Jesus to a high priest. You had a high priest in Judaism, and now the high priest, the conclusion of Judaism, Jesus Christ, the Messiah we've been waiting for. He's showing them the correlation between the two and showing them that it is Christ that you need to cling to. It's the next logical step. You need to just stick with the faith and keep going. He mentions having his heart sprinkled, and I'm reminded how the priests would take the blood and they would sprinkle the altar with the blood. He tells them about the washed with pure water. Aaron and his sons would stand at the door of the tabernacle, and they would wash in the laver, and they would be ceremoniously clean through this washing. And he's reminding them that they're washed through the blood of Jesus Christ. Their sins are gone through the blood of Jesus Christ. In verse 23, let us hold fast the profession of our faith without wavering, for he is faithful that promised. And there's the first time I see that word promised. And we'll see it again as we go through Hebrews here. I want to look at the promise and what that promise is. He's reminding